Make me a servant. What is a servant? Roger's got the mic. He'll be running around. What do you have for a servant? Definition or examples or just how did you answer this question? Robin?
It's one who works in the service of another.
One who works in the service of another. You know, when I was growing up, I was always told by our teachers, when you're defining a word, don't use the word or a form of the word in the definition. But it's true. It's one who works in the service of another or who serves another. What else do you have? Anybody else? Marcy?
Well, it's like being employed by another. As we look at the word servant,
Yeah.
most of them were employed by, people and often lived with them, doing all of their cooking and their cleaning and things like
Right.
that. And then synonyms of that would be attendant, helper, assistant, and then, moving out of maybe the realm of, paying, as an employer, being a servant as in helping others.
Yeah.
Where when someone needs help, you go and help them, or, would be more like what we're going to be studying about.
Helping another, attending to their needs, caregiver. These are all things that are related. There's two Greek words that are often translated servant in the Bible. The first is diakoneo, and this is the word that Jesus uses in Matthew 20:28. He says the Son of Man has not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. It includes the idea of supplying food, taking care of the necessities of life. It's not bowing to every whim of another, but to take care of what needs to be taken care of. Before he came to this earth, our Lord was in the form of God, equal to God. But after he came to earth, he took the form of a bondservant. Now, the word used there is doulos, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But why did he do that? Why did he come to earth and put on the form of a servant? It's not a trick question. What is the purpose of Jesus coming to the earth?
To save mankind.
To save mankind. That's right. I love, Robin often mentions John 3:17. Yeah, everybody talks about John 3:16. The story doesn't end there, right? He didn't come here to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He put on the cloak of humanity. He lived an impoverished life because he saw himself as a caregiver. He tended to the special spiritual needs of man. Who is our ultimate example in all things? Jesus. If Jesus was willing to do whatever needed to be done to serve us, shouldn't we do the same for him and for each other? Because remember, 2 weeks ago when we started the study, it's not about me. And last week, it's all about God. And then tonight, we're looking at serving one another as we serve God. Shirley.
I was just going to say, he's the perfect example of truly what a public servant is supposed to be.
Yeah, he is the perfect example in every way, every facet. Now, I mentioned the second Greek word, doulos or douleo. This is the word that we have in Galatians 5:13, which we'll read. We'll go ahead and read it now. Somebody got Galatians 5:13?
For you, brethren, have been called to freedom, only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another.
You've been called to freedom or called to liberty, but not so that you can use it for yourself. Not so you can use it for the flesh, but to serve one another through love or in love. This word doulos is to be a slave. And it's sometimes translated to be in bondage. It means to yield obedience or submission. Sometimes that obedience is forced. Sometimes it is a choice. So it depends on context whether it's a good or a bad connotation. But Paul here in Galatians 5:13 says we are called to liberty. We're expected to use that liberty to serve, to yield obedience, to be in submission to one another through love. When we look at all the things to which Christians are called in the Scriptures, can we see how they relate to service toward God and to others? Let's look at a few examples. What phrases follow the word called or in that area in the following passages? Romans 1:17, what do you have?
To be saints.
To be saints. What is a saint? You know where that word comes from? Sanctified. To be a saint is to be set apart for God's holy purpose. And when you become a Christian, you become a saint. It's not something you're voted on later, prayed into sainthood, anything of that nature. You are a saint if you are a Christian. You are called to be set apart for God's purpose. What about Romans 8:28? What is our phrase there? According to his purpose. God works all things together for good for those who are the called according to his purpose. We are called to glorify him and to fulfill his purpose. It's not about me. It's all about God. What about 1 Corinthians 1:9?
In fellowship of his Son, Jesus Christ.
We are called into the fellowship of his Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. That word fellowship means association. It means community. It means joint participation. We cannot please God by sitting on the sidelines and watching the rest of the church do all the work. We have to be involved. That's what fellowship means. We are called to that. Galatians 5:13, which we just read. What are we called to?
Liberty.
We're called to liberty, freedom. Freedom from sin, not freedom to sin. Romans 6:17. He who has died has been freed from sin. And then one more verse there, 1 Thessalonians 4:7. This one's kind of a tricky one because it starts off with what we're not called to. He sets up a contrast. What do you have? Sorry? Yes. We are called in sanctification or in holiness. It's the same Greek word as what we saw earlier from the same group of family, Greek word family in Romans 1:7 for to be saints, sanctified, holy. We are called in holiness, not to uncleanness. We are to be sanctified. We are to be holy, set apart for his purpose. Now, Paul warns us that we should not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh. Just a few sentences later, he elaborates on the flesh. In Galatians 5:19 through 21, talking about the works of the flesh, and it's been suggested that these can be grouped into three different categories. And there's a chart on your paper. And there's going to be some overlap, so if you put it in a different column, that's okay. But go one at a time. What do we have under purity? What's the first purity problem that Paul lists? What's that? Immorality. Okay? That's New American Standard Version and some of the other modern versions kind of group the first two together under that one word. What does the New King James have? Adultery and fornication. Okay? Some versions say immorality, some say sexual immorality. It's a broader term than what Paul actually uses here. But it is true, fornication and adultery are sexually immoral acts. Okay? What's next? Impurity or uncleanness. Okay? What else? Sensuality, lewdness, lasciviousness, promiscuity. These are different words that are used in different translations. What's next? Now, this is actually going into if you keep going in the list that Paul puts, I've got these in a different category, the next few. So let's keep going down the purity. Do you have anything else under the purity column? Drunkenness. And what else? And revelings or carousing in some versions. Okay? Now, can some of these be placed in another category? Sure.
People problems.
They could be put in people problems. They can be put in the priority problems too, can't they? You know, what did you come up under priority? Let's do these first and then we'll talk about people.
I only had one, selfish ambitions.
Okay, you put selfish ambitions under priority. That's okay. What's that? Idolatry. What are you putting before God? That's a priority problem if you put anything or anyone before God. Witchcraft or sorcery. Yeah, that's the only two I've got under priority, but there's a lot of overlap. What's that? Enmities. Now I put that one under people. Hatred, enmity. You know, how do you feel about people? Anybody struggle with this one? Anybody else try to avoid going to the Walmart when it's crowded? What's that? I mean, look, I spent 13 years as a 911 dispatcher. There were some calls I did not want to take. There were some nasty people I talked to. And I had some poor feelings towards some of those people after I disconnected. Okay? When you deal with people who do not have the same values that you have, there's going to be some friction. When you deal with the world, when you deal with people who are committed to the works of the flesh rather than the fruit of the Spirit, you're going to have some problems, okay? And I've also got contentions up there. I had to combine some of these just because of space on the screen. What else? Jealousies, okay? Jealousies. And then the next one is outbursts of wrath or anger. Is it wrong to be angry? No. Depends on what you're angry for, and it depends on whether or not you dwell on it, and it depends on how you express that anger.
Which kind of goes back to hatred.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
I can be angry at a child, but I don't hate that child.
Yeah.
You know, so it really is our
Yes.
I mean, I'm out all the time anyway, but you know, it's just, you know, the kids still know I love them, even though at the time, Ms. Browner isn't very happy with them, you know?
Right.
So I think it all also depends on our reaction.
Yeah.
And, you know,
I told the kids all the time growing up, and it's easier said than done. You cannot control how others act, but you can control how you react. How many times have I failed that one? You know, it's hard to control it sometimes. Shirley.
There are some things that you should be angry about,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
certain actions of people and what they're doing.
yeah,
That's why Christ, I think, is what they would do.
right. That's right. All right, what else we got under people problems? Selfish ambition, okay? Robin put it under priority, and that's fine, because if you're going for yourself rather than somebody else, you've got a priority problem. If you're seeking to lift yourself up over someone else. A couple of the other words that are used in other translations for that one is strife and factions and disputes. What else?
and then dissension.
Dissensions or divisions. Okay? What else? Envy and murders. Okay, and we skipped heresies. There's a lot of things here that are related to one another. Okay, you look at the dissensions and the heresies; those are very closely related. Okay, all right. So that's my list, and if you've got it in different columns, that's okay, because there is some overlap here. Now, we're not under the law of Moses. We've gone over this a number of times, but we are still under a law that must be obeyed. How is this law described in the New Testament? What are some of the phrases and passages that describe this law?
I put Matthew 22:39, you shall love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay, love your neighbor as yourself.
Also Romans 13:9, Galatians 5:14, and James 2:8 all say something similar.
Okay, okay. What else?
I was going to say, we kept on reading in Galatians, it tells you the fruits of the Spirit.
Yeah, fruit of the Spirit. Absolutely. Any others?
Well, if we do the first one, then we love God with all our heart. All of it falls in place.
Yeah, and that's Paul's point in Romans 13, I think. You know, if you start with love for God, everything else is going to click. Absolutely.
Which is in Deuteronomy 6.
Yeah.
right? And Leviticus 19:18. And then that translates or goes into Matthew 22, and Mark 12:28.
Right, right. Now, for myself, I focused more on the word law. And when we look at the New Testament and how it describes the law, it's the law of the Spirit of life, Romans 8:2. It's the law of Christ, Galatians 6:2. It's the perfect law of liberty, James 1:25. There are some in the world who claim that we have no law as Christians, and that is 100% false. We are not under the law of Moses, which was given to the Jews only, but we are under the law of Christ.
But wouldn't that also be for Romans 13:8-10, where it says
Yeah.
the one who loves has fulfilled the law?
Mm-hmm.
Love does no wrong to a neighbor,
That's right.
and continue on.
Yeah, yeah, it's all based on love, right? We've got to look at that love, all right? So what are some scriptures that teach that this law must be obeyed?
Well, Galatians 6:2 says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ.
That's right.
And a few others that are similar to that, Acts 20:35, Romans 15:1, 1 Thessalonians 5:14.
Okay. Any others?
1 John 2:4 talks about keeping the commandments.
Keeping the commandments. Yeah.
Don't you think it's because people want to say that there's no law? Because some people only rule their life according to the
Yeah.
And if you do that, you miss the point.
Yeah.
You become a Pharisee because they made up their own rules. What they even were handed down to follow under the law, they abused because they made these subtitles over here of the law that they try to rhyme with everyone. So I think when you only try, even in our physical laws, you only try to say, I didn't murder anyone, so I'm a good citizen, when you miss the point.
Right. Yeah. Let's come back to that thought in just a minute. You're getting a little bit ahead of me. We'll come back to it. All right. Some other verses that talk about the necessity of the obedience to the law. Matthew 7, 21 through 27. It's not just saying, Lord, Lord. It's doing the will of the Father. It's listening to what Jesus says and doing what he says. Hebrews 5, 8 and 9. Though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. And having been perfected, he became the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. There has to be obedience. John 12:48, a couple others that I put up on the screen. I didn't actually put them in my paper. John 12:48, if you, he who rejects me has that which judges him. The words that I have spoken will judge him in the last day. And then Romans 6:17 is that verse that talks about being freed from sin and obeying. You've obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered to you. So, it has to be, we cannot go out and say, well, you know what, I know God said this, but I don't care because I'm not under law. We can't do that. We can't do that, but it's not simply, and this goes to what Shirley was saying, it's not simply because keeping the law in perfection is how we're saved, because that's not it at all. We've got to have the proper motivation for obedience. So what are some of the scriptures that teach that obedience to God must be motivated by love? Robin.
1 John 4:8, he who does not love does not know God, for God is love. Matthew 5:44, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, and then it goes on from there. John 13:34 and 35, love one another as I have loved you. Romans 12:10 talks about brotherly love, and 1 Corinthians 13:2, the Apostle Paul talks about, but have not love, I am nothing.
Right. What else? See, I love these open-ended questions because you come up with so many different verses than what I have. So, yeah.
One of my favorites is, you'll know my people by the way they love one another.
Yeah.
One of my favorite verses, because that's a powerful statement to say that how we're to love one another.
Right.
Because that's supposed to be able to be seen, not just said. Because the world is supposed to be able to know that we love one another. It's supposed to be able to see, physically see that.
Yes, that's right. There's got to be some evidence to it, right?
14, 15.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. John 14:15. Absolutely. Let's see. Did I skip a part? I think I did. Yeah, I skipped a little bit. I'm sorry. I've got John 14:15. I've got John 15:14. And I've got 1 John 5:3. This is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. His commandments are not burdensome. Okay? We don't serve because we're afraid of God in the sense of terror. That if I don't do everything perfectly, he's going to zap me. That misses the point. And that misses the point of grace. That's a law system. And we're cursed if we try to live under something like that. We cannot be perfect. We strive for it, and we don't let the fact that we can't be dissuade us from trying, but we're going to mess up. And we're going to be wrong about some things. And we're going to act the wrong way. We're going to treat people the way they shouldn't be treated. Because we're human. And because we do deal with selfishness. And we do deal with the idea of me, me, me. We have to try to get out of that. And we strive to the very best of our ability to do what God says. We're going to fall short from time to time. And when we recognize that, we confess it, we repent, we come back to God and ask for His forgiveness. All right, so how do we serve each other in the church? What are some scriptures that kind of speak to that?
Galatians 5:13, which has already been mentioned. Romans 15:2 said each of us please his neighbor for his good, leading to edification. In 1 Corinthians 10:24, let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being.
Yeah. Putting others first. Or you don't put them ahead of God, but you put them ahead of yourself, right? Romans 12:10 talks about the kind affection, the brotherly love that we are to have for each other. Romans 13:8, which has already been mentioned several times, the love that has to be the motivating force behind obedience and behind how we treat one another. Philippians 2:3, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem others better than himself. Hebrews 10:24, let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. 1 Peter 1:22, since you've purified your souls in obeying the truth of the Spirit, in sincere love of the brethren, love one another fervently with a pure heart. There's some key words and concepts that are found here. Kind affection, brotherly love, unselfish, humble, encouraging, pure. Do these words describe us in our dealings with our brothers and sisters? We're not to be a people of self-indulgence, but a people of benevolence. I don't remember if it was last week or I think it was the week before. We made a list of ways that we can serve in the church. One of the biggest things that prevents people from serving is selfishness. It's not the only reason, but a lot of times it's just I don't want to do it. How do we work towards service, unselfish service in the future? What can we do to get out of that selfish mindset?
One thing you've got to try, like if you've never
Yeah.
waited on the table, give it a shot, get up there. You don't have to say a prayer, but you can serve. That's a good place to start.
Yeah.
And there's just like the workday Saturday, be a part of that and use your talents for the things you can do. You may be good at patching a wall or fixing a toilet. Use those talents.
Right.
And that's what we should be doing.
Show up. That's it.
That's number
When
one.
when you're presented an opportunity, show up for that opportunity. Whether you're talking about workday or other opportunities, when those times of service, opportunities for service are given to you, try. You may not do well. Okay. You don't know that until you try, right? So show up. When I was looking at this question, I thought about faith. The disciples asked of Jesus, increase our faith. May we never reach the point that we stop asking this question. May we never have the wrong idea that faith is something private and personal that must never be shown. There's some people that take Matthew 6 in that way, and that's not what Jesus is teaching there. Faith must be demonstrated. James chapter 2, verses 14 through 17. What does it profit, my brethren? If someone says he has faith but does not have works, can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. If someone cannot see your faith, it's not the kind of faith that is acceptable to God. Second, faith without works is demonic. James 2, 18 through 20. Someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works. I'll show you my faith by my works. You believe that there is one God, you do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. But do you want to know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead? James 2, 21 through 26, to continue the thought. Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar? Do you see that faith was working together with his works, and by works faith was made perfect? And the scriptures was fulfilled, which says, Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And he was called the friend of God. You see then that man is justified by works, and not by faith only. Likewise, was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works, when she received the messengers and sent them out another way? For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. A faith that fails to help other people is a faith that does not love God enough to serve and to give Him glory. We don't go around bragging about what we do, but we go about doing good just like Jesus did. Not to receive attention, but to give Him glory in what He allows us to do, what He gives us the opportunity to do. All right, final thoughts. Shirley. Yeah.
Others in the area. And even though they did this through suffering, it wasn't an easy road for them. They continued to show their faith, their endurance in spreading the word.
Yeah. All right.
You know, Jason,
Yeah.
I think we kind of circle back to something again, one scripture that I mentioned tonight, and you find it again in James chapter 2, I think around verse 8, where it says, if you love your neighbor as you love yourself, you do well.
Yep.
I think it puts faith in action if you can really love your neighbor as much as you love yourself.
Right.
You know, and that takes faith in action to be able to do that, and it kind of just circles all of this together.
Yep.
You will want to be a servant. You will want the best for them. You will pray without ceasing because you need strength to love that neighbor as much as you love yourself. So, a lot of things to pack into that one scripture.
Absolutely. All right. I handed out a paper earlier. That is for 2 weeks from tonight. because next week is singing night. So men, be prepared to lead a song, read a scripture, say a prayer. Ladies, come with some requests. If you can give them to us before Wednesday, that'd be great, so we can work on a little bit ahead of time if we're not super familiar with it. And then we can sing it next week. And in 2 weeks, we will talk about serving to win others. All right, I thank you for your attention tonight.